your job as a leader is to hear what's going on, listen to what's going on, but make sure you're not being distracted by the loudest person in the room.
Welcome to What the 40 with me, Rich Russ. It's a great honour to introduce my guest this week, Mr. Tom Otton. Tom has been at the forefront of digital media in the UAE for the better part of 2 decades as the MD and co-founder of Create Media Group, growing the business to a team of 200 plus employees. Tom is also an athlete and true adventurer, an endurance athlete and ultra runner. Last year, he completed the Ice Ultra in Sweden and has previously completed the Marathon Des Sables, amongst others. He can often be found training in extreme places. Tom's pursuit for excellence, his focus on challenging himself physically to overcome the odds, and sharing his belief in the power of adventure is truly inspirational. It's a privilege to be chatting to him today. Tom, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome to What the 40.
Thanks a lot for the invite, mate. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. Well, I say thank you for being here, but I'm actually in your wonderful space.
You are, yeah.
In your epic podcast recording facility. So thank you for letting us do it here. Appreciate it.
Very welcome, mate.
So look, the first question, as I, reflect on the things that I just said about you, both in terms of business and adventurer, is how on earth do you have time to be you and to carry it so well with such a energetic, fresh face? It must be quite the challenge to balance everything you do.
No, I appreciate that, mate. I've got some incredible people in my life that facilitate. What I mean by that, an amazing wife that's very understanding.
Yeah.
She knows when things need to happen for work. She just gives me the space and the support that I need.
Yeah.
Running a business of the scale that we're at is a challenge, as you can imagine. There's always something going on, whether it's an internal or an external crisis, but there's always something. So she's super understanding.
Yeah.
And then outside of that, it works hand in hand because what I do from an endurance standpoint, the ultra marathons and the like, that's part of my process.
Yeah.
If I don't do that, I won't be as effective as I can be at work. I spend a lot of time being mindful. I do all of the cryotherapy work. I do a whole bunch of kind of ancillary things around the edges of my life to try and make me as productive as possible. And whether that's an amazing management team that allow me to go off and run through the Arctic Circle for sort of 6 or 7 days, or a desert or something like that, or it's my wife at home. But I'm lucky to have some amazing people.
So you've effectively created the conditions to enable those things to happen. And we'll get into the cryotherapy because
cool.
I'd love to hear much more about that. Well, I don't know if I'm a fan or not, but I definitely want to hear more about it.
Yeah.
But when you say it's part of the process, I find that really interesting. So I guess what you mean by that is you found a way of prioritizing the elements outside of work, or work in inverted commas, to enable you to give you a sense of balance, even though I'm guessing your life isn't balanced in what some people might consider to be work-life balance. But how do you kind of weigh that up, and how do you assess those priorities, and how do you just make it work?
Sure. So 2 ways. One, I have this view about macro balance and micro imbalance. Yeah. And what I mean by that is that if you're constantly seeking this kind of idealistic balance, then what you're actually doing is you're gearing for average. Yeah. My belief is that you should have micro imbalance at any point in time where you're super focused on certain things that you're trying to push forward. Now, sometimes that might be family, sometimes that might be work, sometimes it could be your fitness or your adventuring, whatever it might be. But you go all in on that. Yeah. Yes, to the detriment of other areas, but you don't let them go drop off too far. Yeah. But you really focus on things, and you pull that back and you go somewhere else. Yeah. So you're constantly in a state of imbalance. Yeah. But as long as from however you want to extrapolate that out over an annual period, you've got balance. You are spending the right amount of time with the family, or you're focused enough on work in certain areas. Yeah. So this that concept's really served me well. The other, to answer your question in a different way, I believe that all of us have a certain capacity for stress. Yeah. It's different for everybody. And you really need to understand what your capacity looks like. Yeah. And you can do certain things to increase your capacity. Yeah. So we've all gone through it. The age of the listeners, I'm sure we're all in a certain stage of our lives. At work. You're probably potentially running teams. You've got a lot to deal with. You're juggling a lot of things. Now, there's obviously only a certain number of hours in the day and so much capacity of stress that you can deal with. For me, running is a way of decompressing so that I can go again. Yeah. Whether it be meditation, breath work, the cryotherapy I've spoken about, I take quite a lot of breaks actually from work, and I'll go away somewhere in the mountains and I'll go running. And that is literally me unplugging from the world. I'll put a bag on my back and I'll go out for hours in the mountains. And I come back and I feel like a different human. If I do that for a few days, I can plug back into work and can pretty much deal with anything. I wouldn't be able to do the level of work that I do on a daily basis if I didn't have something that allowed me to decompress and give me my capacity back. And I think one of the things that people get wrong is that they martyr themselves to work to such a point that they believe that they should just keep dealing with it. It's not physically possible. And then we get burnout, we get anxiety, we get people, having to just walk away from their careers because what they didn't do is they're trying to run a sprint and not a marathon. The only way to run a marathon is to take breaks. And to understand what it is that you need to do to decompress. It might be skydiving. It might be surfing. It might be running, whatever it might be. But you need to find out what that is for you.
And I guess that's the way you talk about the kind of the macro piece is really interesting, because what you're essentially saying is you see the bigger picture, but you know when to kind of focus in, zoom out, zoom back in again. I'm interested when you talk about the decompression piece, and I obviously, for me that's skydiving, and it has been for many years, and I think I know exactly what you mean. But do you feel a kind of physical response to that when you go through when you put yourself in that environment?
It's absolutely physical. I feel a physical response to stress as well. I get to a certain point if things have been particularly tough, or we've got a huge number of things to get across the line, whether it be big client events. We're doing a lot of high level government work, as and that comes with peaks and troughs. Sometimes it's mayhem, and sometimes it's a little bit less than that. I know when I get to a point where I physically feel it in my body. I won't sleep well. I'll get headaches. I'll feel the physical effects of stress, and it's at that point I know I'm like, cool, I need a few days out. So I will do what I need to do, and sometimes that means spending money. Really, I don't feel
to get on a plane or to do something
exactly
else.
in any way ashamed of that. I'll be like, right, I'm going to go away for a long weekend. I don't care how much it costs. I need to get out. I need to plug myself into some mountains. I need to go out running, and I'll come back in 4 days and I'll be back on form. So for me, that's how I deal with it.
And you talked about, you have amazing people around you who kind of enable that. So because I guess the other parts of what you do day to day is there are people because of what they have to do who make demands on your time, whether that's professionally or clients or home. And that's something that I certainly thought about from a stress perspective, which is these continuous demands and how you manage those. How do you feel that you sort of respond to that? And do you have a kind of way of saying, okay, I'm done, you can't contact me? Or do you kind of change gear in terms of how you respond to things?
No, good question. I think there's got to be some sort of filter in place. And a filter can be a number of things. It can be people. So in terms of obviously having the right management team in place that are looking after certain areas of the business for you. It can also be, you can structure it around time. I'm not contactable at this time, but I am at this time. But I think absolutely you have to have some sort of a filter. For me, in terms of if you're relating it to stress, your job as a leader is to hear what's going on, listen to what's going on, but make sure you're not being distracted by the loudest person in the room. It's about what's the one thing that if it does go wrong is going to bring the house down. Now the house down in this instant could be, I don't know, an upset client or losing a client or something along those sorts of lines. And it's not necessarily the one that's shouting the loudest. And that includes the client themselves. Sometimes you might think, okay, they're upset about something, but in all honesty, bigger picture, it's not a huge deal here. But over here, the one that's kind of like just smoldering a little bit in the background. That's what I need to deal with. So for me, it's if you don't have that ability to filter the noise coming at you, then you're going to try and do everything. You're going to do a really average job at those things. You're probably going to fail.
I think that's such a good point. I mean, in particular, I guess it's a way of sort of equalizing the voices and then deciding which one you need to dial up or down. It's interesting. I had a conversation with someone today about how you respond, how you run crisis simulations. We talked about an example where a city was flooding. And at the same time, in the company that we're talking about, loads of things were going on. And you've got the HR team going, no, but this is the most important thing. Or someone else saying that. And actually you go, well, the bigger context here is the city's flooded. So let's make sure people... And I thought it was a really interesting example. And I think it's exactly what you're talking about.
Because the reality is, to the person that's speaking to you, it is their most important thing. But it doesn't mean it's your most important thing.
Right.
And that's the the role of leadership is to be able to look at all things and figure out where you need to either spend your time or use your resources to fix whatever the problem might be.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think that goes to mindset, which I'd love to explore a bit more with you as well, because I mean, every time I've seen you over the last few years, you always strike me as being enormously positive, upbeat, have a kind of an energy that's palpable and inspiring, frankly. So
appreciate that.
How do you sort of, and I guess it goes back to what you're talking about, but how do you show up in that way continually whilst managing those triggers and the things that you know affect you? How do you keep that kind of mindset? What are the principles that you follow in terms of just staying in that state of mind?
Yeah, I honestly, I think that there's two sides to it. I think I am fortunate to be wired that way. Yeah, I see the opportunity. Yeah, even when there's a problem going on, I'm like, okay, I'm not oblivious to the fact that this is a real issue. Yes, but there's the way that I look at it is, I've been doing this quite a few years now. You get to a point where you're like, okay, this is an issue, but I can get through it. And normally it works out better than it did before, but you just can't see it yet. Yeah. And you have to have that positive belief that although I might not see it yet, I have faith that we will get through this and we will look back and be like, that was a really good thing for us, actually. Yeah. And when that happens over and over and over again. Yeah. But I wake up in the morning, I'm super grateful for everything that I have in my life. And I actively, how to explain it? I actively cherish that, I suppose, whether it's my relationship with my wife and my family, whether it's the fact that I get to come to work and choose what I spend my time on, that I've got an amazing community of people around me, the clients that we choose to work with having impact on the world. And, we're not just trying to create shareholder value. The clients we choose to work with are the ones that are really having an impact on a nation or a region or a city. Yeah. And I think that's so energizing that I can't help but be positive. Yeah. And it's also, I feel life is, I've experienced it myself so many times. And then you read it in all of, I suppose, the self-help books, that the reality is life is about what you make it. Everyone's going to be dealt cards. Yeah. Everyone's at some point, everything's going to fall to pieces. Yep. But the reality of life is beautiful. Yeah. But you have to have a positive outlook on the cards that you're dealt. You're like, sometimes it's going to be shit. Yep. And sometimes you're going to get through it. And I'm fortunate. I think my mother instilled this in me, that I'm really grateful for this. I don't feel sorry for myself. Yep. Yeah. About anything. Yeah. And I'll go a little bit deeper here. Like I was diagnosed with cancer at one point in my life. Yeah. And not even a glimmer of like at any point I felt sorry for myself. Yeah. And I don't see that as me having mental strength. I don't see it as something I cultivated. Yeah. I literally I'm fortunate to have been born that way. So if shit's really hitting the fan, I don't go into a dark place thinking, woe me, why is this happening? Yeah. I just look at what's happening and be like, okay, how do we get out of this? Yeah. And that's my default. So then that automatically, as soon as you start to get a little bit out of it, you're like, oh, this is good.
We're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. And then you're positive again because you can see the path. Yeah. But if you're going to stay in the hole thinking, I've got a victim mindset. Yeah. This is happening to me. Blah, 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 blah. Then you can't help but be negative.
Why me? Why is this happening?
Exactly. Yeah. And people get caught in that space that they believe that, that life happens to them. And my firm belief is that there's a whole bunch of things going on, and it's how you interact with them and how you steer your life accordingly. Yeah.
So I'm interested in that, and without getting too personal. So how old were you when that happened, when you were diagnosed?
Gosh, I was 24.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I asked that partly because obviously this is what the 40s, so we're sitting here as 40-year-olds having a chat, looking much younger, of course, in your case. But clearly that has given you, I suppose, without going to the specifics of the situation, I guess to what you were just talking about, the kind of muscle memory for how to navigate those situations. Yeah. And I love what you said about, as you start to get out of something, as you start to, whether it's recovery or whether it's just a business situation improving, you suddenly go, okay, we've got momentum here. We're headed in the right direction. Things will be better. Yeah. And life is cyclical. You're going to, as you say, you're going to go through these peaks and troughs, but actually, that sort of, that experience base that you have, and it sounds like you have within your CPU somewhere, there's this amazing kind of positivity hardwire, which I think it's so valuable to business, but also the stuff you do outside of work. I guess there are situations in your some of the adventures that you do, which are frankly nuts, you must need to draw pretty deep into that.
Yeah. And that's really helped me in so many ways on those runs. When you're 3 days in and a couple of 100 kilometers into a race somewhere in the arse end of nowhere, and whether it be the Arctic or the Sahara or something like that. It's very interesting actually, because ultra running is very much like life, because you can be cruising along and you can feel amazing. And you might have 80 kilometers in your legs.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, you feel amazing.
Yeah.
2 kilometers later, the world is ending.
Yeah.
And you're like, there's no way I can finish this race. I can't move. I'm drained. I'm wobbling. And it happens so quickly for no real reason.
Yeah.
But you have to, the only way that you can be successful as an ultra runner is to take stock of what's happening.
Yeah.
You understand, okay, why do I feel like this? What's happened? What have I not eaten? How's my hydration? You have to go through this checklist.
Yeah.
You go through these things. Okay, I need to slow down a bit. I need to get some food in. This is the type of food. This is why. This is my hydration plan. This is where I'm at in the race. I've got a checkpoint coming up. You just go through all of these checklists, and you figure your way out of the problem that you're in.
Yeah.
The where people fail in ultras is they get to that point and they think that it is linear.
Yeah.
But it's not. Everything is cyclical, as you said.
Yeah.
So you can be at the bottom of the bottom.
Yeah.
But in 3 kilometers, you could be right back at the top of that mountain. And you could be running 5 minutes a K again and feeling amazing.
Just because you're in the trough of despair doesn't mean it's going to continue that way.
And that's exactly like life, right?
Yeah.
Just because the world has ended now, I guarantee you in a day, a week, a month, a year, you can be in a completely different space.
So true. And I mean, the parallels you can draw to business, you can imagine, I guess in your scenario, you run a big agency. So you must go through, you have a client relationship one day that changes the next, or you go through, staff, you have staff one day and they say, amazing member of your team decides they want to go and do something else. So you're faced with these challenges all the time, but actually
Absolutely.
those, 3 months later, 3 weeks later, those things are entirely different.
You just figure it out.
Yeah.
Figure it out. And that's what we're trying to instill in the team as well, which is just this understanding that this is a really big problem. We're like, okay, it is.
Yeah.
But there's always a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I'd love to go just before because we can go down the whole business rabbit hole, which I'd love to do. But just going back to ultra running, what was your trigger? What was the first kind of trigger or the first ultra race you ran, and what made you choose that, and how did it come about?
So I've always had this ethos that I want to squeeze as much life out of life.
Yeah.
And what that means to me is going all in on everything.
Yeah.
In business, I'm constantly trying to grow and build, and I think that drive has allowed me to create what we've done here with the agency. In running, I wasn't interested in just going for a run.
Jogs.
No, what I wanted to do was to be like, right, well, how far can I go?
Yeah.
Personally, but also where could this take me?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I want to run across a mountain range in an area of the world that hardly has been touched?
Yeah.
But why wouldn't I want to run across the Sahara and see what that looks like?
Yeah.
It's about getting to the end of my life, knowing that I've traveled to everywhere, been to everything, tried everything, failed at loads of things, been successful at some things.
Yeah.
But just constantly pushing.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's where life is here to be lived.
Absolutely.
And for me, it's that was all part of it. So it wasn't so much the running, it was the adventure side of, okay, you happen to be going there to do a thing, which is running. Yes. But what you're actually doing is having an adventure across the Sahara in 5 days, like self-supported, or going to the Arctic Circle and spending days on end running through snowdrifts and across mountains. Like that's an adventure. You just happen to be running. You could do it on a bike if you like. Yeah. You still have adventure. And that's the thing that drove me. And then everything kind of the adventure pulled me, and then all of the running and the training and preparation gave me the discipline and taught me the lessons I didn't realize. I wanted to go for fun, adventure. Yeah. But then in order to get yourself in the shape to run 250K, it teaches you the discipline, the going on sessions when you don't want to. Like I've got to run for 2 hours this evening at the end of the day. Yeah. I've had a really shit day. Yeah. But I know that I have to do this because I've got to do 70K in these 4 days. Yes. And if I don't do it today, it means I've got to do 40K tomorrow. Yeah. I don't want to do that. No. So,
I think I'd choose the shorter one.
Yeah. It teaches you the mental discipline, right? Yeah. And that then plays out in everything. Every area of life is obviously, they say discipline equals freedom, right? This is Jocko Willink's saying from the Navy SEALs. And it's, if you're disciplined with yourself, you can do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you kind of manage the prep in terms of, because clearly that's not a small task to go, right, I need to run, what did you say, 70K in 4 days?
Yeah.
So
these 4 days, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you, particularly with the things we just talked about, do you just kind of sit there with a macro planner and go, right, okay, these days I need to do that? Or is it a bit more organic? How does that kind of work?
I have a training program.
Yeah.
I have a plan for each day, what I need to do.
Yeah.
I just have to get it done.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
now work does what work does and throws me out of shape sometimes. And I have to be a bit flexible. And I'm not, I'm really not anal about like spreadsheets. And
Sure.
I'm quite, I'll kind of go with the flow. So if I wake up in the morning, I'm like, no, I really don't feel it today. But sometimes like you have to, as you get a bit older as well, context of the podcast,
Yes,
but
indeed.
as you're getting a bit older, you do really have to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
So sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm like, discipline's telling me I need to do this run today.
Yeah.
But my body's telling me you need to rest because you got a big day at work.
Yeah.
You've had a shitty sleep.
Yeah.
You need another hour in bed.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be much more effective. So I'll just run in the evening instead.
Yeah. Look after yourself in the meantime.
So don't crucify yourself and break yourself. It's and this is something I've certainly learned a little bit later in life.
Yeah.
Is that you got to work with yourself.
Yeah.
And not just, it's not just because it's written down, you have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to do it in the macro, but it doesn't mean you have to do it in the morning. So just kind of that, you have to be kind to yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's been a big lesson in the last few years.
Nice. Well, look, and on that, the recovery piece is something I'm interested in. And you talked about cryotherapy earlier.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't assume to know what that is, other than I've seen your post of you jumping in these ridiculous ice baths on a very frequent basis.
Yeah.
So tell me about that and how it works.
Sure. So there's two sides. Cryotherapy is basically temperature therapy.
Yeah.
Now people know it as cold, but also as heat, obviously.
Okay.
So I've built a sauna in my garden that I had installed a little while back.
Yeah.
And then I've also got it's essentially a chest freezer.
Okay.
Nice. Which is incredible. I mean, literally, I keep having to remember to unplug it or turn it off because the whole thing will freeze into one block of ice.
Yeah.
So I crack the ice and get into it. But anyway, the reason is it does many things. I go through breathing exercises first. So the Wim Hof breathing process.
Yeah.
So really oxygenates the body.
Yeah.
Helps with recovery. And then when you get into the cold water, it does a couple of things. It's mental training.
Yeah.
You wake up in the morning, often the last thing you want to do is get straight into 4 degrees water.
Yeah.
But if you consistently do that, you make yourself do that, amazing things happen. So you feel like you've accomplished something for the day.
Yep.
So like that
makes sense.
Big tick, right? You've done something that you really didn't necessarily want to do, but you're like, right, I'm in charge of the day.
Yep.
I planned it. I did it. I'm in charge of the day. But from a physical standpoint, it reduces inflammation across the body. Now we know inflammation causes everything from cancers to endless issues across all areas of our cells. Yeah. So it reduces inflammation. It helps and it aids with recovery from running, because obviously what you're doing with the distance that we're doing is constant damage to the muscles, right? So they're supported by hot cold therapy. In terms of using the heat of the sauna, that does a whole bunch of things. So it helps, it releases these things called shock proteins, which help with recovery because of growth of cells. Yeah. It also helps with, honestly, just it creates from a mental standpoint, the moving between the two. Yeah. It's
like when you're skiing and then you go to a sauna afterwards.
Yeah, it just feels amazing, right? It feels amazing. You're so in the moment, because especially when you get in the water, you're super focused. You're like, I've really got to stay in this. Like you can't think of anything else. Yeah. So you're hyper focused. It makes you hyper present. Yeah. And then you get into the sauna, you relax that a little bit. You can start thinking about the day. You can start to process things. It's my quiet time. I'm sat in that sauna all on my own. There's no phone. There's no notifications. Yeah. It's just me time. Yeah. So I sit there and I think about stuff and I'll process things. Yeah. Often what I find in this day and age, what happens when you stand in the lift or you stand in a coffee shop in a line?
Straight to your phone.
First thing you do is go to your phone, right?
Yeah, it's so true.
Now, so at what point are you able to actually file your thoughts? Yeah. What point are you able to decompress from a meeting? Yeah. You're not. Yeah. You're going from, you walk out of a meeting, you've inputted loads into your brain, you're trying to figure it all out. You walk out of the room, you pick up your phone straight away, you're on Bloomberg reading an article. Yeah. You walk to get a coffee, you're speaking to the next person. At what point do you
just
actually...
hyper connected all the time.
Yeah. So at what point do you actually allow your brain to process this information? So if you don't find these ways, running is perfect for me because I can't be on the phone.
Yeah.
I can't be reading anything. I'm just there.
Yeah.
I know.
No, I totally hear you. I mean,
so you have to process things in the right way.
Yeah. And you make a good point about filing your thoughts. Like, if you think about it, like how a computer works, or even how your brain works, it needs that recovery time. I mean, the only time a lot of people have now to do that is while they're asleep. Yeah. But actually, so you make an interesting point. That's exactly why I took it. Like, one of the reasons I love skydiving so much is because you sit there for 30 minutes in the aircraft. Yeah. And it's the one time I'm like, I don't have my phone with me.
No one can contact you.
And it's the most, you talk about decompression. It's the most relaxing time to just just get lost in your thoughts. And then you are incredibly present when you jump because you kind of have to be.
I'm sure you are.
But I think it also raises a point around, given where we live in the world, given where you operate your business, obviously it's massively demanding and everything that goes with living and working in this region. But also there's this incredible palpable momentum and energy of being here, and particularly at the moment. So I'd just be interested to kind of get your take on how you feel the business environment, particularly in Dubai, but the wider region has changed, and how you kind of assess it at the moment. And I think it speaks to what you're talking about this. There is a sense of where we live is hyper connected and hyper plugged in, and part of that's wonderful, but obviously it also presents challenges in day to day and how you manage yourself.
Yeah, it does. So in terms of my view on the region, just to start with, certainly from a business point and also personal, because they're so intertwined.
Yes.
I couldn't think of anywhere else in the world I'd want to be right now. I think that across this region, it is the most dynamic place. And all the numbers stack up. You look at the potential growth in GDP over the next sort of 24 months versus what's going on in the US and Europe.
Yeah.
The macroeconomics of this environment right now are phenomenal. We've got the largest inflow of wealth into the UAE of any country in the world through the number of millionaires, billionaires moving to the country. Yeah. Not only just buying holiday homes, but moving offices here, right?
Yes. Yeah.
We know that's there's a few reasons for that. Focus on Web3 and crypto. The outcome of the war. Yeah. And the region is benefiting from this in different ways. Now, that makes me hugely optimistic about the opportunity that's here. So going back to being positive all the time, I'm like, well, I mean, I can't believe that we're almost in a way so fortunate to be in a place that is just going hell for leather. I was just recently at an event a couple of days ago, yesterday actually, with the CEO of Dubai Tourism. Yeah. And he was doing the city briefing that they do periodically through the year. Yeah. And going through all of the statistics, PowerPoints, there's 1,000+ people in the room. Yeah. And he's giving the presentation about, this is what we've done over the last sort of 5 or 6 months. This is the statistics around room occupancies, average spends, people coming into the city. Yeah. But then here's where we're going with the D33 plan for for Dubai. And I'll visit Saudi, and we're talking about Vision 2030 and how our clients are trying to be part of that. So I can't think of anywhere else in the world that has such a clear focus on where they're going, has the funds to make sure we get there, is pulling everybody in the same direction. We don't have this division of politics pulling us to the left and to the right. We've got one clear focus with one clear leadership, with one clear plan, and everyone's going at 100 miles an hour. Yeah. And I feel that we're just pulling away from the rest of our competition, the rest of the world. Yeah. So to be running a communications business in that environment, when we fortunately have the opportunity to help tell those stories to the world. Yeah. I mean, that's what wakes me up every day. I just get excited. Even when I talk about it and I think about it, I'm like, how did this even happen?
I can see why you're bouncing every day. But I think you're right. I mean, it is just the momentum and just the energy that comes with all the things you just talked about. Yeah. And I agree with you. I don't think there's anywhere. I had this conversation last week. I don't think there is anywhere else. There's no other city. There's no other country that can just compete at the moment.
Not even close.
No. And but it's the collective sense. It doesn't matter who you talk to, any area of business or, friends, colleagues who live here, everyone's feeling it. And I think there's something wonderful about that as a moment in time as well. Yeah. So which brings me on brilliantly. So the podcast is called What the 40.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and think about kind of moments in time. I'm interested in, I know you've lived in the region a long time. As you turned 40. Yeah. Did that have any impact on you? Did you stop to reflect? Did you give it a second thought? Like, did you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really did. I didn't think I would, honestly. Okay. I thought it would just blow through another number again.
Yeah.
But whilst it wasn't like the date, it was more just kind of like the time period. Let's say, 6 months before, 6 months afterwards type of thing. And just like, I really have taken away from this recent period that, memento mori is a real thing. Yeah. You get to a point when you're a bit younger and you're like, I'm invincible. This is going to go on forever. Yeah. I've got all the time in the world to build whatever I want. And then you get to a point where you're like, okay, well, maybe I'm at halfway.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking at the second half.
Yes.
And now obviously you are looking at your own mortality.
Yep.
And then you're like, okay, well, what impact do I want to have?
Yeah.
How do I want to show up in the world? Am I happy with what I've achieved? I'm a naturally positive person. I'm grateful for all the blessings I've had, and I'm grateful for what I've been able to achieve through my own work and those that have supported me. So I'm a very happy person at this point in my life. I'm proud of what I've done.
Yeah.
But I'm also focused on making sure that I follow through with that.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that in my own way that the world is a better place because I was here.
Yeah.
Now I look at that in different ways. Like, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? How do I want to spend my time? How do I want to make sure that I'm leaving a positive impact?
Yeah.
Whether that be through my own family, whether that be through communities that already exist or that I'm still to create.
Yeah.
So it made me ask a lot of the big questions.
Yeah.
Which, it just makes me more positive. I'm pumped for it. I'm really excited to see where this goes. And I think quite honestly, I don't fear getting to the end. What excites me is that this process happens for everybody.
Indeed.
And how beautiful is it that we get an end point that we can work backwards from, so that you can have the intensity to be like, you've only got this much time left.
Yeah.
So make it fucking beautiful. Like do everything that you can, like experience everything you can.
Yeah.
Make it wonderful for other people. Take every risk.
Yeah.
If we didn't have that end point and everything just went on and on and on.
Well, and you'd never have no framing of any kind.
No frame of anything. Like there would be no incentive to get stuff done because you're like, there will always be more time.
Yeah.
So I believe that although we're looking at the second half, I believe that that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, indeed. No, I love that. I think it's a brilliant ethos. And somebody else I spoke to a couple of weeks ago was talking about the fact that she actually broke it down slightly differently. She said, I think about kind of 4 quarters of life.
Okay.
And actually, decades ago, you'd get 3, you maybe get 3/3, and now you get kind of 4 quarters where you can be active and do so many amazing things.
I think that's actually more that's more on point than 2 halves, because it's not 2 halves.
But I think maybe for men it is, for women less so. But there is something nice about, particularly when you're well and you're able to just kind of blast through it. And I think you talked earlier about the importance of llooking after yourself.
Yes.
And I think exercise, which clearly is a passion for you. Well, passion is the wrong word, an obsession and a passion. But looking after yourself now will hopefully give you the building blocks for longevity and for all the things that you want to continue doing, even whether, however many decades you have left. But I think what's important is health span, not lifespan, right? Yeah, so exactly that. Nobody wants to be the last 10 years of their lives in a hospital bed. No. So I'm taking steps to try and increase and improve my health span as much as I possibly can. And that's where I will invest time and money. Yeah. Because I believe that, okay, well, if you're fortunate to have the ability to spend on these things, then where better to spend it than trying to make sure that you're as healthy as you can be for as long as you can be for your family, for the world. You can have more impact. Yeah. You can just show up in a much more effective way. Absolutely. So I'm looking at that in a few different ways. Yeah. I'm doing some interesting tests, actually. I'm going to the US. Okay. So Peter Diamandis and Tony Robbins I don't know if you've seen the book Life Force. Yeah. That's doing very well. So there's Fountain Life, which is a series of clinics that they have. Yeah. So I'm going over there in September to do a whole bunch of precision diagnostics, they call it. Yeah. Which is full MRI scans. It's all the DNA testing, genome sequencing. Yeah. They integrate AI with medical screening and give you information that you just can't get anywhere else. Okay. Wow. Which I think is going to be really interesting. Yeah, it is. To see how things are mapped out. Yeah. I'll give you one example. They test for like 50 different types of cancer, for example. Okay. And I might get this number wrong, so don't hold me to it, but it's something significant like this, that I think it's something like 2/3 of cancers you don't feel them, or they don't show up in terms of you sense them in your body somehow. They don't show up until stage 3. Right. That's like 2/3. That's terrifying, isn't it? Isn't it? So like there's loads of people that you might have an issue that you have no idea about. And by the time you find out, it's quite possibly options are limited. It's limited, right? Yeah. So imagine finding it pre stage 1. Yeah. So it's it's those sort of things. And obviously that you can join the dots there. Like I've been through that in the past. Yeah. And for certainly when you're younger, you're selfish. It's just about you. But when you're older, you're like, I need to be here for kids, and I need to be here for. So if I've got the ability to be able to fly to the US and do these tests, then that's where I'm going to spend my money. And make sure that
and doing things for the right reasons. That's the investment that I want. Right?
Brilliant. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah.
And maybe you can do the 140 pod. If this unlocks a whole new longevity.
I'm definitely not trying to get to 200, but I think I do believe the way things are going that we're going to be living longer than many expect.
Absolutely. Well, we just know so much more about how to, the examples you give are obviously, the sort of the extreme end of it, but just there is so much more knowledge and almost just no more excuses on why you shouldn't look after yourself.
But what's interesting on that though, mate, is that the current health system, I believe, is broken because it's built on the wrong. It's built on the wrong things. The building blocks are ancient.
Yes,
and the reality is that a lot of new medical knowledge and innovation doesn't get through to the general healthcare system for 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
So the reality is that the day to day, the information that we've been given is archaic.
Yeah.
And there's so much more out there. And this is what the guys are trying to do at Fountain Life is to try and bring that to...
And accelerate that process.
Exactly, accelerate that process. Obviously, it starts off expensive and then they try and bring the cost down for many of these things so that can be to the masses.
Yeah.
But the reality is, the current healthcare is not where it can be.
No, it is archaic. And you're right. There's so many elements of it that need to be shifted on their head and just rethought through.
Yeah, look, my sister's a doctor. She's training to be a consultant doctor. Yeah. So I mean, she's at that level, and I love to bits, but still speak to her about nutrition, and there's no training. Which is mind blowing.
This always exactly that. You're just like, how on earth you could speak to 5 different doctors and get a totally different perspective on nutrition, or a really outdated old school version. Say eat a low fat diet, which includes things like margarine. And you just think, there's so many elements to it. You go, hang on, this makes no sense.
Yeah, but in fairness, you got to think. Not in fairness. What I mean by that is, let's look at how that system is structured as well.
Yeah.
And my sister went through full medical school and didn't have any nutritional training.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is wild. So is that what they're there to do, or is it to prescribe? And also, I have this debate with her as well, and she's like, I just didn't get taught that.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, my sister is a nutritionist. Okay. So she's always hammering me, and she's always anti medical advice, and there's two
sides to it. I mean, look,
we should get together next time we're all in Dubai.
The work my sister and her colleagues do is absolutely fantastic, but there are areas that I ask questions for sure.
Yeah. And so you should. Questioning is the way we move things forward. Cool. So a couple more questions for you. Want to have you very conscious of time.
Take your time. I'm in no rush.
Cool. Okay. Well, first of all, how did you celebrate your 40th?
I went to town with that one.
Yeah,
I did. So I
all in.
I went all in. I went all, which is probably unsurprising. I hired a big villa in Tuscany.
Amazing.
And,
nice.
I got a whole bunch of friends together and awesome. had a big event in the garden, kind of overlooking the hills, and it was one of the most beautiful things.
Yeah.
I had friends that I started out with in school.
Excellent.
Right the way through to my business partners here at the agency.
Yeah.
Couldn't get everybody there, obviously, but I think in total we had, about 35 people there.
Nice.
And it's just incredible that everyone had flown in for it.
Yeah. Brilliant.
It was
perfect.
Absolutely perfect. So it was the right way. So and I got to treat my family to staying in a beautiful place and it was nice.
Drinking amazing wine, I guess.
I mean, as you can imagine, you're in Tuscany, right? So the food's incredible, the wine's incredible.
Yeah.
Everything's laid on.
Hillside views.
I mean, it's the best. Yeah. It's
phenomenal. Phenomenal. Okay.
So, yeah.
And I guess I'm just going back to something you talked about earlier, and you talked about Tony Robbins and Life Force, the book. Where else do you seek your inspiration? Because clearly the things that you do day to day, a lot of the stuff you talk about is kind of self-motivated, self-managed, and requires incredible discipline. But what are your kind of broader sources of inputs and content, and kind of where do you sort of read or listen or watch?
From? Good question. There's a whole bunch of, I'd say, different areas of my life require different inputs, right? So some are from the communities I'm in. So whether it's endurance, I'm part of the Inner Fight community here in Dubai. Huge inspiration from so many people in that community doing unbelievable things around the world.
Yeah.
And I'm just part of that process. And I draw a lot from that. Also, looking up to people that do crazy things, whether it be like a David Goggins reading his book, everyone's kind of got on that train recently. But those sorts of things, like just being inspired by but by the big names, but also a whole bunch of people that that you won't know about, that I follow on Instagram and do cool stuff. And it's funny. It's like, I think with every maybe hobby or passion or interest, to the outsider that looks at it, you think that, okay, wow, you're like so far up, like in that space, because people might look at me thinking, okay, well, you're doing a 250K race. That's wild.
Yeah.
But I know because I'm in that community that that's a really small thing that loads of people do.
Yeah.
And that there are people that are doing 10 times that. And, I'm following a girl that's running across the entire Alps. And so I know that I'm a really small fish in a big pond. But often people will look at a type of thing and like, I'm sure it's the same. I look at you going skydiving and I'm like, wow, man, that is bloody wild.
Yeah.
Like you're jumping out of the plane all the time, but you know that there's people doing far more than you. Because you're in that space, right? So so I get a lot from the community that I'm in. Outside of that, in terms of real learnings, the Huberman podcast for me is an absolute win. I love it. So Andrew Huberman, Stanford neuroscientist, during COVID started doing a podcast.
Great.
And he's unbelievable. So I really enjoy those podcasts.
Okay.
He really goes deep on the science.
I will check that out.
Yeah, you won't understand all of it. But you just take bits of it. But any of the areas that you enjoy and you like. Like whether it be, he'll do an entire show on like REM sleep, for example, like how to benefit that. Like a whole show on like a hot cold therapy, a whole show on psychedelics, or whatever tickles your fancy. But he goes deep on that and gives you real scientific information. Which is great. And then outside of that, there's a range of different podcasts that some that people will know, like the Modern Wisdom podcast or, Diary of a CEO, right the way through to some obscure ones that, that people won't. But I obviously do a lot of running. And although I would like to do running in silence, I do listen to podcasts because that's my time to learn. So sometimes I'm in silence and sometimes I'm listening to a podcast. But because of the number of hours I do running, if I'm running for 8 hours in a week, then at least 4 or 5 of those I'm going to be consuming content, which is, it's half a book.
Well, it's great learning time. And just on that, how do you find the physical running whilst kind of listening? Have you just trained yourself to be able to, doesn't impact you in terms of, I suppose if you're doing those distances you do.
Exactly. So it's low level running, right? So I'm not listening to music when I'm doing a track session on a Tuesday morning and I'm sprinting my guts out.
Sure.
But I'm listening when I'm cruising for a couple of hours and I've just got to plod along and I've just got to kind of keep my heart rate low. So then it just, you find flow with those, right? So my legs just move. So then I'm just basically almost sat there.
Nice.
It just kind of happens.
It's just happening around you.
Yeah, it's just happening around you and then you're just listening. So I go pretty deep on certain books like Stephen Kotler, Stealing Fire was a real interesting one. Art of the Impossible was another book of his with Stephen Kotler. I've just listened to those two, which I really enjoyed. Naval Ravikant, the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. He didn't write it himself. It was someone else that wrote it. It was pulling all together all of his content from around the internet and writing a book about him, basically. That's a fantastic book.
Nice.
And then outside of that, a lot of Stoic philosophy. So I really enjoy a lot of Ryan Holiday stuff. He's my go-to for all the Stoic philosophy stuff. So I absorb a lot of that and I try and implement that in how I show up in the world.
Well, I'm definitely going to take some of those tips and have a listen. I hope others listening might do the same. Final question.
Go for it.
What's your guilty pleasure? How do you keep back when you're not doing those things?
Oh, what is my guilty pleasure? My wife would say I don't have any and that I should loosen up a little bit.
I knew you were going to say that. I'm not accepting that answer.
I know. So people think that people that don't know me very well will think that I'm just business and running and everything's on a spreadsheet and blah, blah, blah. That's not the case. I enjoy those that have known me for a long, long time will know that I enjoy having fun.
I've been out for a few beers with you.
Exactly.
I know this.
Exactly. So, whether it's going off on party holidays to Ibiza and enjoying the beach clubs, whether it's having a few beers and just enjoying myself with friends, I know how to enjoy myself. And I would say that is my guilty pleasure. Like I draw energy from that. So if we go back to the kind of the micro, balance, imbalance thing, like I'll dial that right back when I'm training for a race like I am at the moment.
Of course,
But as soon as that race is finished, I'm like, cool, we're going out. It's going to be big. We're going to have a lot of fun.
And sometimes that's as restorative as anything else.
100% it is because you need to absorb. Like there was a study that was done recently. I think it was the longest ever study on happiness. It's been lasted for like 80 years. I'm not sure if you heard the results that came out about this.
I saw the release, but I haven't looked into it.
So it's incredible. There's a TED talk about it. So it's like the fourth lead of it because it's been going for 80 years. Obviously not everybody that's still around has gone through it.
Of course, that's a strange one as well.
Yeah. So the end result of that is that there's a whole bunch of data points and information from this, obviously. But the kind of to sum it all up, that community is the single biggest deciding factor on happiness, longevity, on like all of these things, health span, lifespan, all of these things, more so than whether you smoked or not, is a sense of community. So those close people that you have in your friendship circle, those 5, 6, 8, 10, whatever you've got that are close to you and your family.
Yeah.
That is the difference. I suppose in one way,
those connections
between life and death at a later stage.
Wow.
So fostering those. So that's something that I've really taken a lot from. So I will go out of my way to be like, create an event where I'll set all of this up to bring you guys together. Or let's go on this holiday and I'll do this, and you guys just need to be there. Just fly in and we'll do this together. Yeah. So trying to kind of create those moments where you can, and it doesn't have to be anything grand. It can just be, going for dinner, but just making sure that you're investing in those relationships. Yeah. And I would suppose I suppose when you talk about it that way, it's not really a guilty pleasure, but outside of the work and all the rest of it,
it makes complete sense.
Yeah, you got to kick back and enjoy yourself with your friends. You can't be robotic in life.
Yeah, indeed. Tom, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. I could talk to you for hours, but I really appreciate this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for coming in and having a chat. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Let's do What the 50 next.
Let's do it.
Cheers.
Cheers.